All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 parakim Rambam, Hilchoi Sanhedrin, and the Ha'onchin Hamasurun Lahem, Parakim Chafei Chavav, and we're going to also start today, God willing, Hilchos Edus, the first chapter, Perek Rishon. Today's first chapter is the 25th chapter of the laws of Sanhedrin, in which we're going to learn both the humility expected from a judge and from a Beis Din, on the other hand, the respect from the people towards the dayan, towards the Beis Din, and we will also learn the procedure of calling someone to a din Torah, which is what we call a hazmana, and then what might happen, God forbid, is someone refusing to go, which is a masada for din, and what do we do if someone will refuse to go to a din Torah? The 25th chapter has 11 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph, says that Asur l'dayan linoy b'srara ala tzibur. It's forbidden for a judge to assert himself, right, in a haughty manner, over the community. He must be humble and he must be in awe of the community. The whole parnas, the word parnas means any communal leader. A communal leader, that casts unnecessary fear upon the community. And that fear that he's imposing is not l'shem shamayim. That person nenash will be punished. And from the punishments that the Rambam writes, he will not see from his children anyone that's a Talmud Chacham, God forbid. And that's mamish the meaning of the pasuk in Iyov, where it says that lochein yirei that therefore people fear him. He was speaking about a communal leader that would always impose some sort of dominion over the people. That when people fear them, that person who has that character trait won't see any descendant that's a chacham leif, God forbid. Halacha 2. This dayan may not behave towards the people in a way of kalus roish, by minimizing them, even if they are ignorant people. He should never step over their heads. Now, actually, this doesn't only mean figuratively, it also means literally. And for those of us who have the merit to be by the Rebbe, 770, when you are in an environment where you have thousands of people coming to hear a lecture, thousands, and people pack in there, as they say, like sardines. What happens if you come late? What did we do? So well, the way 770 was built is that the types of benches they had, there was a bench that people sat on, if you were lucky to have a little seat on the bench. Then there was this the back part of the bench that had a little bit of a table-like piece of board where people behind you can put their siddur on. So people would walk on those tops of benches. What you end up doing is you end up stepping over people. So now a dayan can feel, let everyone wait for me. When everyone is there, I'm going to come. When I'm going to come, I'm going to get to my place by stepping over their heads. That's very disrespectful. You're not allowed to do that. And you're not allowed to do that even if the people are hedyotos, they're common people, or shvalim, they're lowly people, however you define that. Nevertheless, you should remember that Bnei Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, that every Jew is a descendant of the patriarchs. And Vitzivois Hashem, and he's part of God's army. That God Almighty took out of Egypt with great power, and with a strong hand. How beautiful. And a dayan has to know that he has to bear with patience the difficulty of the community. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu told God Almighty in the portion of Baha'aloischa, that I am carrying the Jewish people like a nursemaid carries an infant. Similarly, when it says in Parshas Devarim, now there are 2 verses that I'm quoting now. The first one, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I commanded the judges. Doesn't say what he told them to do. That verse means Moshe Rabbeinu commanded the judges that they have to be patient, to tolerate the community. And say Moshe Rabbeinu, and we have to all learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the Rebbe of all of the prophets. Interestingly, why did Rambam has to write this character trait of Moshe Rabbeinu when he's speaking to judges and not the prophets? But okay, Kivan Shishloch HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahem b'Mitzrayim. Shenemar Vayitzavim El Bnei Yisrael. When God sent him to Egypt, means God commanded Moshe to the Jewish people. From oral tradition, the word God commanded Moshe to the Jewish people means that Hashem told the following to Moshe and to Aaron, that I'm sending you there, almanas, on the condition that you have to be so tolerant of the community that even if if they're going to curse you, and they're going to stone you with stones, you have to still be completely subservient and in service of the community. So that is what's on the judge. Now let's go what's on the people. Just like the judge has to behave that way towards the people, the community are also commanded to afford honor and respect to the judge. As it says, also in Parshas Devarim, another pasuk, I commanded you, that's Moshe to the people. Here it's to the people. So the first one that the Rambam just quoted, is Moshe Rabbeinu's command to the judges, how they should feel towards the people. This command is the commanding the people how we should feel towards the judges. That they should have awe and reverence of a judge. Now the judge has to help the people respect them. In other words, you cannot expect to behave in certain ways and have everyone around you respect you. So for us to be able to respect the dayan, the judge may not act in a demeaning way in front of the people. Nor may he act frivolously. And as we'll see more details in a moment, so there has to be a certain distance of the dayan and the people. It's a bit removed. That facilitates us respecting the judge. When a person is given any position of leadership, this person is forbidden to perform work in front of three. For him not to be demeaned in front of them. Not that God forbid work is demeaning, but it means to say that when you have a person in the society that we're not supposed to look at them panim al panim, we have to look at them up, so they have to be a bit removed. Now that Rambam says from this rule, if they may not work in public, certainly they may not eat, drink, get drunk in front of the masses. Certainly not in the gatherings of Amei Ha'aretz, in the gatherings of people at large. You have people that, they have friendly get-togethers. It's not a friendly get-together to learn Torah. It's a friendly get-together, which is very nice for the Mereim, for the Chavedim. But in other words, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I want to be your buddy, today in parenting. I want to be my child's friend. No, you want to be a child's parent. A judge has to behave like a judge. And woe is it to those judges that they behave that way. And you know what happens? That they disgrace the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. They debase its laws, because they represent the Torah and they lower it ad eretz until the earth. And they bring about not good for them. Okay. Now let's go back to the halacha. Now we're moving on. So everything that we spoke about is to the judge, and now let's broaden it to the court. So there has to be this respect towards the court, and respecting the court doesn't only mean to the individual judges, but the court will have to have, like we learned, shluchim, that they send out their agents to notify the people, to subpoena people, to forewarn people. So they represent the court. So says that Rambam, one is not allowed to act frivolously with the agent sent by the Beis Din. And to make that point, says the Rambam, that the fact that this shliach, for some areas in halacha, is believed like two witnesses, in which area, as we'll be learning soon, that there are certain steps when a person is going to be called to the Beis Din, when a person gets a hazmana, and they're somehow misadek, they refuse, as we'll see details in a moment. One of the tools that Beis Din will use is that they'll put that person into a band of ostracism, that's called a nidui. And if that person doesn't start listening, obeying the Beis Din, then they put him into a higher level of ban. We'll speak about that soon. Let's speak about the first level. Normally, for someone to be put in nidui, in the lower level, in ostracism ban, how do you know that he misbehaved? You have to have two people testifying that he did whatever he deserved that. Not so with the shliach Beis Din. If the agent of the Beis Din says that I went to call someone to the court and that person did X, Y, and Z, which is in disrespect, we believe that individual. It was the fact that the shliach is believed like one, that's because he's given a certain higher status and he represents indeed the court. So one cannot behave disrespectfully towards the agent of the Beis Din. If he comes back to the court and he says, so-and-so disgraced me, or cursed me, or so-and-so, when I went to call him to the din, he cursed the judge. Or that guy says, I'm not coming. Right away, they put Misham to Maisim Alpiv. That person is ostracized. Now, there's going to be levels to it. So first of all, there's a verbal ban. Then there's something even more severe, which is writing it down. The document that writes, so-and-so is placed in a ban is called a pischa. A pischa cannot be written based on the testimony of one, even if he's the agent. But the verbal ban is imposed on the person only because the agent said that he was disrespectful towards me or towards the court. All of that is just the reason why we have to give an extra level of respect towards the agent of the court. Halacha says. Now, if you are an agent of the court, normally we are very careful not to speak anything that's not positive about your fellow Jew. He's going to come back to Beis Din. This is common. He goes, when we say don't shoot the messenger. Why do we have such a statement? Because people would shoot the messenger. He's coming from the court, telling you, you are being called to Adin Torah. Many people's anger towards that is directed towards the agent. So they tell him, go to hell. Or they curse the Beis Din. That person should be put into it. Now, the Shliach Tzibur should not tell himself, I'm not going to tell the court what this guy said. Lashon Hara. No, he has to tell the court what he said. Whoever gives any type of pain towards this agent, Yesh LeBeis Din Rishus, Beis Din has permission. This is for Kavan's department. Lahakoy soy makas margins to give him rabbinic plugins. Here we go. Kavan Molachayim. Kavan is one day is going to react. Rabbi Zajac, I don't know why you associate that with me. Kavan is the gentlest guy that I know. He's just the guy that if he were to hit someone, oy gaval. That's why. That's the only reason why I mentioned him. Halacha said. Shliach Beis Din Sha'aman. Now let's go into details. When the Shliach Beis Din comes to an individual, we have to know what to tell him. What are the two options? The court is summoning you. That's called the hazmana. Or he gives the name of one of the judges. That sounds less serious. So if he only quotes the name of one of the judges, three judges are sitting together. But instead of him saying the court is calling you or these three, he just mentioned one, and the litigant that was called doesn't want to come, you can't write down this document of ban because he did not hear that he's being summoned by the Beis Din. In other words, the Shliach Beis Din has to tell him that Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, the judges, are summoning him. That he has to mention the name of all of the three. If he only mentions the name of one judge, even though the guy should have obeyed, but you're not going to write that ban down. That's when the Shliach summoned a person on a day where we don't know if the judges are sitting in session or not. So when you only hear the name of one, you don't understand that it's coming from the court because who says they're even sitting in session? But if there's a day in which it's known that the judges sit then in session, certain places they always would sit Mondays and Thursdays, and a guy is being summoned, even though the shliach of the Beis Din only named one of the judges, that person understood he's not being summoned by one judge. It's as if he mentioned all three, and if this person refuses to come, and two people attest to that, then not only is he banned verbally, but they write a pischa. No, we're not looking for that. First of all, the oral ban is also very serious. Yeah, we're not looking to trap someone. But every case is a case. Could be if a guy has a history that he doesn't come to the summons, could be they do that. Yeah. Halacha ches. So let's go into these details. A guy that's called, this is called a hazmana and a masad of living. If someone was summoned to come to the base and he doesn't come. Now it's very important to note, I'm saying this right now, that if you live in a city that has an official base, which is not Los Angeles, it's more complex. In here, if someone is summoned by any base, you have to respond, but you don't necessarily have to come. You can tell the base, listen, I'm going to go to a dentoida, but why to you guys maybe to another dentoida? So what you need to do is you have to have, if you're being summoned by a base, you have to respond. You cannot ignore. In some places, you have to actually go there. If this is the official city's base, then you have to go there. Now, if someone was summoned and they didn't come, so we're going to see how many times does that person need to not come until he's put into a ban. So I know that there is the way it works right now. The Rambam is going a couple of steps back over here. The Rambam says he's right away banned, and not only is he verbally banned, and it's a ban called midoi, which in English is called he's ostracized. And I want to tell people that in Hilchos Talmud Torah, in the 7th chapter, there's not enough time. Look over there. The Rambam goes into details of what does that imply if someone is on that ban. So there's a ban called a nidoi, and then there's a more serious ban called a shamta. And the Rambam describes over there how much do people have to stay away from this individual. They're both serious. One is more than the other. The first one is called a nidoi. And not only that, the guy who was put into the ban has to pay the scribe for writing this down. Now, he's not going to pay for it right now, but this person will eventually want for it to be removed. Part of his process of getting it removed is then he's going to pay for it. When he's going to come, the moment he comes to court, they right away rip it up. He's only being put into ban because he's not coming. He'll come, they rip it up. Cost for all of Pischa. If they wrote a ban to him because he's not accepting the psak din, not that he didn't come, he came to the court. And it happens, you go to the court and there's a ruling, and when the ruling is pay, the guy says, I will not pay. So, it's if you put into the ban because you're not coming, the moment you step into court, they rip it up. If you were put into a ban because you said to the base that after you lost the case, I'm not going to obey, when do they rip it up? Not when you pay. When you verbally say, okay, I'll pay. We don't want this guy we don't want people to be banned. But the moment he changed his attitude, even though he didn't pay it, you have to rip it up already. Kiven sha'amar hareini mekabel hadin. Even though he didn't pay it, you rip up this needle. Next, if they summoned him to come today and he did not come, now we have to be certain that he got the summons. And the Rambam is going to unpackage that in a moment. I know today with technology, it's a whole new world. When you send to someone an email or a WhatsApp and you can know whether they saw it or not, then if we know that you were summoned to come today and you didn't come, you'll be put into this ban by night. That this person who was summoned, we know is in the city. So his act of not coming is an act of defiance. And by the way, you can send messengers to the court to explain, I cannot come today because of X, Y, and Z. That's fine. We're speaking about a person who doesn't respond. You cannot respond. But if the guy who's being called to court lives in the villages, and we know that he comes and he goes. So to begin with, the Beis Din can never tell him, come today. Why come today? You have to tell him, come Monday, whenever you're summoning him. If he doesn't come Monday, he's summoned to come on Thursday. If he doesn't come on Thursday, he's summoned to come on Monday. In other words, he's given 3 summons. That's the source of today. Today, we always give everyone 3 times. He's summoned 3 times. 3 hazmans. If at the final second Monday at night he doesn't come, that's when he gets a pischa. But again, we have to know that he got the summons. We'll get to that now. Halacha 9. Another thing. We never summon to someone to a Beis Din on any day of the month of Nisan, nor on any day of the month of Tishrei, because everyone is busy with Yom Tov. It's interesting to point out that we can understand this, obviously, prior to Yom Tov. Post Yom Tov, there's also a concept. You're like, people need a breather. So don't right away, Yom Tov is over, I'm going to court. You give the person, it's only a week that's given. Nor no one should be summoned to come to the court on Erev Shabbos or on Erev Yom Tov because you're busy. Now, what you could do is a person could be summoned on the month of Nisan that he should come next month. It's not that Beis Din cannot send him his summons. The date of appearing cannot be on these months. But you know what? On Erev Shabbos, you can't even send a person a summons on Erev Shabbos for him to come on Sunday, Monday, because that's the way of the world. People are so busy on Erev Shabbos. Let's add these words. So it's possible that you will forget that you were summoned because of the occupation of being ready for Shabbos. If a person lives in the city, went to his house and didn't find him. Question is, can the Shliach Tzibur leave the summons with the neighbor? That's what the Rambam is getting to. And ironically, if you live in the city, no. Let me tell you by heart the psychology here. If you live in the city and the Beis Din is in the city, and the Beis Din's agent will tell the neighbor, when your neighbor comes, tell him he's being summoned. The neighbor won't even pay that much attention because the neighbor knows that the Beis Din has access to him. So him being asked to do something on their behalf is not so urgent. If a person lives in a village, Beis Din is not in the village, so they send someone to travel specially to call him to court, and the guy was not home. So you tell the neighbor understands it's greater responsibility. He knows that if I won't notify him, there isn't another opportunity. Okay. So if he's in the city and the Beis Din doesn't find him, you can't tell the neighbor to notify him. No, you have to find him. So wait, go back to Rome. And the Yom Alone, you have to tell him directly that you're being summoned. But if the guy lives in a kfar outside the city, Medina means city. Another detail. If this person who's being summoned every day goes to the city, we know it comes every day. 1 second. Then, that's the only time that the shliach can tell one of his neighbors, even to a person who's normally not accepted halachically as a witness, like, for example, a woman, that notified this guy that he's been summoned today to come to Beis Din. Today. Today is another detail, because if it's about, I'm asking you to notify someone tomorrow, you might forget tomorrow.
And he comes to the city all the
time. And he
comes
to the city all the time. So we have to know that these neighbors see each other. There's a lot of presumptions. It's not foolproof, but we can assume in many settings that the guy would have gotten the notification and no one forgot, there wasn't enough time to forget, and he's coming anyways, all of that, correct. Then they put him in a chedev at night. When is that said? Only if this guy proper, when he goes to the city, he never walks near the Beis Din. If the neighbor knows, even if he lives in the village, that this guy anyways, when he goes to the city, his road goes by the Beis Din. The moment the neighbor feels my being a messenger is not essential, they're going to find him anyways. The neighbor is not obligated to be the agent of the Beis Din. They don't feel the burden. But if Darkele means that this guy who goes every day to the city walks by the court anyways, even though the shliach went to the village and he notified the neighbor, you can't ever ban the guy for not showing up until when you notified him. Because maybe the neighbors said to themselves, the neighbors never told him anything. Why wouldn't the neighbors tell him anything? Because they say to themselves, anyways, this guy walks by the Beis Din. If I'm not going to notify him that he is being summoned, Beis Din is going to see him walk by and they'll summon him.
Is that why it said the entry?
What was that?
The Beis Din.
No, Yaron is pointing out something interesting, that being that we learned in the beginning of the series, that Beis Din normally establishes itself physically at the entrance of the Beis Din, this will be common, that someone who's traveling to the city will be walking by the Beis Din, which also means that if they did not summon him directly, you can't presume the neighbors told him. You can hope they told him, maybe they didn't, because they feel, you don't have to tell him. This doesn't matter, he's going to walk by the Beis Din anyways. Even if this guy travels to the city, but not every single day, we don't rely on the neighbor, because if this guy is only going tomorrow, the neighbor thinks, I don't have to tell him today, I can tell him tomorrow. By tomorrow, they might forget. The point is that we have to know because of chazakas, that this guy knew he's being summoned. Only then can you ban him for not showing up. And the final halacha of this chapter, halacha Yudalev, Mishu Beis, the person comes to the court, to keep Aladin. And when he heard they lost, okay, I'm not happy, but I'm not telling the judges, I reject it. And they tell him, okay, pay. And the guy doesn't pay. That's something else. He's not saying, I'm not listening to the Beis Din. It's just, I'm accepting but he's still not paying. So they don't put him into Chedem until he's forewarned, Monday, Thursday, and Monday. And if you remember going way back, if this guy says, I'm going to pay, but I don't have money, then he's going to be given more time. This is just about a person. We're trying to say that you cannot rebel. Rebelling means either saying in your face, I'm not going to subject myself to your authority, or just ignoring, pay, and the guy doesn't pay without justification. So if the guy doesn't pay without anything, they put him into this lower level of nidui for 30 days. Now, if 30 days go by and he still doesn't pay up, then they put him into a chedem. And again, look inside Hilchos Talmud Torah to see the differences between, generally, when someone is in chedem, others may not even enter in his daladamas. Very little interaction can happen with him. On nidui, if I remember correctly, he's still allowed to go to work to make a living. Once he's put into a chedem, there's more restrictions on him even earning a living, him learning Torah, etc. Okay, moving on to the final chapter of the laws of Sanhedrin. The 26th chapter is about the prohibition of cursing a judge. It's mamash a specific lab, and the Rambam right away will say it's usher to curse any Jew. The issur of cursing a judge only means that the judge is also a Jew. You'll be, you're violating more than one violation. And the Rambam is going to speak about the very serious prohibition of taking a legal action in a non-Beis Din. And the only few times that one is allowed to go to court, so to say, because you attempted to go to Beis Din and the other party clearly did not come, then you have no other option other than. This chapter has 7 halachas, and again, this is the final chapter of Hilchos Sanhedrin, beginning with halacha al. Kol hamekalol dayan medayona Yisrael. Whoever curses a judge, a Jewish judge, and we began already earlier on whether this is a judge that has smicha, whether it's a judge that doesn't have smicha, but he was given authority to be a judge from the Rosh Golus, a judge. He's violating a negative commandment, and this is the meaning of the pasuk in Mishpatim where it says Elohim. This is we pronounce it that way because here it's referring to a judge. Lo yisikalo, don't curse a judge. And another thing, now that Rambam is broadening the issur of cursing. If a person curses, the nasi either means a king or he's a prince. Echad Rosh HaSanhedrin Hagdoila, or the head of the Sanhedrin. Interestingly, the Rambam began that the head of the Sanhedrin is called the Nasi. Yeah, but not in this context, obviously. If not, it's superfluous. Oy HaMelech, maybe the Nasi means a Rebbe. Oy, God forbid. Oy v'lo yisasei, shenemar v'nasi ba'amcha, lo yisa'oy. Now the Rambam goes further. V'lo dayan or v'nasi b'lvad is one who one may not curse, and if one does so, you're violating a negative commandment. Ela kol hamekalel echad miYisrael. A person curses any Yid, any Jew, loike, he gets malchus, which is quite amazing because normally we say that, right, if you violate a commandment with a non-action, you don't get malchus. These are from the 3 exceptions. Shenemar loise kalal chedesh. The pasuk says in Parshas Kedoshim, don't curse a deaf mute. Now, what do we mean by a deaf mute? A deaf mute is more about the deaf than the mute. Don't curse someone even though that person cannot hear. Why does it say chedesh? And since you don't hear, you don't have the pain, nevertheless, you get malchus for cursing him. Because cursing a person has a negative effect on him, even if he didn't hear it. And the Rambam therefore says, if indeed one may not even curse a deaf person under this a biblical violation with the penalty of malchus, you cannot curse a minor. A minor cannot be worse than a deaf mute. However, halacha beis, if someone curses someone who already passed away, then they are exempt from getting malchus. Now, says the Rambam, a question. If cursing is something that may not be done to any Jew, why did God write a specific law concerning Elohim loisikalo or nasi ba'amcha loisa'or? So the Rambam says, I'll tell you why, to be chayv twice malchus. You're violating two commandments. And say Solomed, oy bazoi, says the Rambam, comes out, if a person curses any Jew means whether a man, whether a woman, right? Doesn't matter the gender, whether it's an adult, whether it's a minor. For that, right away, you're like a achas. Now, if this person also happens to be a judge, a Jew who's a judge, you're going to chayv malchus twice. If you're going to curse, God forbid, a nasi, we're going with the presumption that this nasi is also a dayan, he'll be chayv malchus three sets. Uben nasi shekil alaviv, and the son of a nasi that God forbid curses his father, that's another law, right? V'chayv mishum arba shemus. Shloisha shel kol adam v'achas mishum ha'ov. And now let's go even more. Halacha gimel. Hamakal l'latzman. If a person curses himself, you get malchus. Mamash as cursing another Jew. And that's the meaning in the pasuk v'aschanon. Hishamar l'cha u'shmor nafshecha ma'oid. Take heed and guard your soul. Guard you. That's the source in the Torah that one may not hurt oneself. And we understand the power of words. And cursing a person hurts them, like we said, not just because they heard it. It does something to them. So you can't hurt yourself. You're not allowed to curse yourself. Now it comes the nuance. When are you going to be chayiv malchus? It's never curse. But to be chayiv malchus, you have to use God's holy name. As we'll give an example. Either the names of God that may not be erased, like Yudke, or Shin Dalad Yud, or Elokim, V'chayoytza Bohen, or even if a person only is using bikinoim and hakinoim, a descriptive term that's referring to God, like when we speak about the merciful one, we are referring to God, right? The vengeful one, the Keil Kana, the Chayoytza Bohen, Hoyel Bu Chayev. Okay, Nukuda. Only if you use those words are you going to be Chayiv Malchus. In other words, a person says, "May God curse you." You understand? Now, what happens if a person uses the word God? So the Rambam says he'll also be Chayiv Malchus. Notice, once we establish that a person is Chayiv Malchus, even if he didn't use God's holy 7 names that cannot be erased, even if he only used the kinoi, a descriptive term, the person says, "May the merciful one, bless you," if that's what he said. So if a person used other languages, they're Chayiv. Let's say in English, using the words God. The names that the Goyim choose to use in reference to God Almighty, they are not less than any other descriptive term that we have in the Holy Tongue. And finally, the Rambam writes like this, something interesting, that the words arur connotes, can imply a oath, but it can apply a curse, and it also can apply a nidui. This is used. So if a person says, I'm an example, Arur ploini lashem, he used God's name. He didn't say the word kolala, he said the words Arur. That's also a person who's going to be chayiv malchus. Even though the word Arur can be used when a person is being banned. We learned in the previous chapter, the text will be that person should be Arur. There, it doesn't mean cursed. Doesn't mean that. It means the person is in a ban. You understand? And if a person is making an oath, in the context of an oath, a person can use the words arur, and it just means an oath. So this is a word in the Holy Tongue that, depending the context, accordingly, would have a whole different meaning. In the context of a curse, it means a curse, and Yechayiv Malchus. Okay, halacha 4. Now, when we're speaking about technically, you want to give a guy floggings or a woman because they violated that, well, that person has to be forewarned prior to, like any other chiyuv malchus, in front of 2 witnesses. But if the person was not forewarned right before that person uttering the curse, or if a person cursed without using God's name, or without using not even a descriptive term in reference to God. For example, the person just says the words, Arur ploini, may so-and-so be cursed. Or if the person implied the curse, for example, by the person saying, Al yihi ploini baruch Lashem, that person should not be blessed to God. Al yivarcheo, may God not bless him. It's not a good thing, but you don't get malchus. Even in the above cases where you did not technically violate this law, and therefore you won't be chayiv malchus. Nevertheless, if you cursed or demeaned in any way a Talmud Chacham, you will be put in a ban. And furthermore, and if the judges feel that the only means that can be used to stop this guy from doing this in the future is by giving him rabbinic floggings, so be it. Makin v'oinshin, how much? As much as they understand is needed. Because this person disgraced a Talmud Chacham. The word zaken means an elder, a learned elder. Now, if this person demeans, denounces, denigrates a commoner, they do something. We don't say, the guy technically did not use God's name, or there was no hasra'ah, and therefore there won't be malchus, so let it be. We don't let it be. We don't want people to use the powerful word that God blessed us with, the koyach of dibur, to say something negative about another yid. And that will, what will they do? It depends. That will depend, right, on who gave the verbal abuse and who was the one that was the recipient of the verbal abuse. Right? If it's coming from a lowlier person, however you define that, to a greater person, the penalty will be greater. Halacha vav. Now we learned above, my friends, in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that a judge, a nasi, could be moichel their honor. They are allowed to do so. The king may not, but they may. That doesn't mean that one can curse them. If someone cursed them, the guy cannot say, I forgive you. No, that person will get malchus. Even like we mentioned in the beginning of this chapter, you may not, right? The Torah says that you can't curse. So the chedesh, the commoner, says, I forgive. Because this guy sinned, you violated God's rules by doing it. But if a person, like we mentioned, is only going to be put on a ban because he didn't use God's name when he cursed, right? And now Beis Din wants to forgo their honor. They want to overlook their honor. So there the Beis Din has the right to do so. But they have to make sure that by forgiving that person, it won't create some sort of loss to the honor of heavens. Like, for example, if you have people that are miva'atim b'dinei Torah b'dayanim, people that are repudiating the whole system, you can't allow them to get away with it. Not because of the judges. They overstep boundaries by publicly putting away, knocking the whole rabbinate. That has to be a reaction. And the final halach of this chapter, halach 7, kol hadon b'dinei hagoy. If a person adjudicates, he takes his judgment to be adjudicated by in court, in the civil court, in the American court system, in the Brazilian court system, and it's in a non-Beis Din. Even though in this manner, in the topic, in the judgment, they're going to a place where they follow the same rules of the Torah, whether they acknowledge it or not. So it's not that I'm taking someone to court and the outcome will be different than the outcome would have been. No, it's going to be the same outcome, same rule. This is a very strong expression. The person who took his fellow to a non-Beis Din is called a rasha. And look at and it's as if he directly denigrated and lifted his hand against the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's the pshat of the opening parsha of Mishpatim. Ve'ela ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneim, right? You learn Chumash Rashi. Lifneim, mishpatim have to be put in front of Jews. V'loy lifnei goyim. Lifneim, v'loy lifnei hedioites.
This doesn't apply today, does it?
Huh? Of course this applies today. Of course this applies today. No, let's just finish until the end. Now what happens, Kevan? When the Goyim have a powerful law enforcement system, which is today in the modern world, or today if someone is taken to court, the losing party will have to follow through. And you have an issue with your fellow Jew, but that person is a mafioso type of guy. He's not someone who's going to obey the Beis Din so quick. And you know that a Jewish Beis Din won't get the money out of it. So even there, first call him to a din Torah. What normally happens is the guy doesn't want to come. He doesn't recognize the din Torah. If he doesn't come, then the Beis Din that sees that this person is refusing to come to a Jewish Beis Din, they will give the other party permission to take him to a Goyish court. In order for you to save your money, that's where you are allowed. And that's how it works today. So if two Yidden have an issue, first you go to a Beis Din. If the guy will be Mesarev B'din, it's very easy today. They send him an email. The guy doesn't respond to it. He doesn't recognize them. Then Beis Din gives you permission to take him to court. then it's allowed. And with this we say, Brich Rachmana D'Sayim, blessed is the merciful one that allow us to conclude the laws of Sanhedrin. And my friends, we are starting now the next series of halachas. We're starting Hilchos Eibus called the laws of witnesses. Let's open up with the header. It says that Rambam Yesh B'chlal and Shmoina mitzvahs. In it, we are going to cover 8 commandments. 3 of them are positive, 5 of them are negative. And let's go and specify them. Number 1, if you know, you have to testify. Now we're going to learn a very important nuance in the first chapter. This obligation is if you were summoned by someone, by this litigant, by that litigant, by the court. It's time to know. If you know and no one asked you, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't go, but the level of seriousness of you not going to court is not there. So we're going to unpackage this as we learn. Halacha 2, that when a witness comes to the Beis Din, there is a mitzvah on the judges to question and to interrogate, and we'll see what word that Rambam uses for what sorts of questions. We're going to have chakirois, we're going to have drishois, we're going to have bedikois. We're going to unpackage this as we open up this series. Number 3, that a witness who already testified in a case involving capital punishment, that witness cannot serve also as a judge. Can't be the witness and the judge, as we'll see inside. Mitzvah number 4, this goes back on the court, and that is that don't establish a halachic ruling based on the testimony of only one. We'll see where this does apply. We'll see exceptions to it, but that's the general mitzvah. Number 5, that Beis Din, it's more in the Beis Din, that Beis Din should not accept the testimony of a transgressor, as we'll see. Number 6, Beis Din should not accept the testimony of a relative, as we'll define, Rishon b'Rishon, Rishon b'Sheni, Rishon b'Shlishi, Sheni b'Shlishi, we'll unpackage this. Number 7, this goes on the person, that a person may never testify falsely. And number 8, which is the final one, an Eid Zoymim is a witness who conspires through saying a non-truth to affect a certain outcome. He knows that this false testimony is going to make Beis Din rule against someone. When we discover halachically that this person is what we call a conspiring witness, we should do to that whatever the outcome would have been. It's not like the sin is you conspired, you lied in court. That's the sin. Doesn't matter about what. We don't look at it that way. If you were an Eid Zoymim, someone was an Eid Zoymim in a capital case, and Beis Din already said that guy should be put to death, if we catch them to be Eidim Zoymim, they will be put to death. Whatever they were causing to happen is what happens to them. And we're going to unpackage all of these mitzvahs in the subsequent chapters, starting with the first chapter, Perek Rishon, which will be our 3rd chapter of today. Perek Rishon is going to cover both the mitzvah of saying testimony in a court when you know testimony, as we'll explain, and it will also cover the general obligation on the judges of questioning and interrogating the witnesses. This chapter has 6 halachas, beginning with halakha al. It says that Rambam ha'ed, a witness, mitzuva is commanded, is obligated, laho'id the Beis Din, to testify in a Beis Din, b'chol eidu sheyeda, regarding any testimony that he knows of, whether his testimony will bring about a chiyuv on one of the litigants, whether his testimony will bring about a schus to one of the litigants. There's an obligation. However, now this is so important. When is the person mechuyev? That's only only if the person is summoned to testify. In other words, you're not mechuyev to volunteer. That Rambam is not saying that you shouldn't volunteer, but this you have to. No, that's if you're being summoned. Now, the word shenemar doesn't go on this qualification. There's no proof on the qualification. The proof is going back. How do you know that generally there's a chiyuv? There's a mitzvah that's not a chiyuv. Let me word it this way. There's a mitzvah that if you did it, it's good. You're not mechuyev, right? You're not obliged. but you get a mitzvah, but you're not obligated. You're obligated. How do you know you're obligated? By the fact that it says at the end of the portion of Vayikra, who aid or yada. If he doesn't testify, he'll have to bear his sin. In other words, there is the time where your knowledge and not coming forward is a sin. And therefore you're mechuyev. Now the Rambam adds this big detail. When are you mechuyev? When you're being summoned by any party, by the Beis Din, by this litigant, or by that litigant. Halacha number 2. Now let's go into exceptions. If this person who knows something related to the case is a big chacham, and how do you measure this? Who's doing the measuring? I don't know. But the Rambam is saying, let's go to the council. The whole Beis Din, all of the judges are pachos mimenu b'chachma. They're lower than this. They're not on this caliber. So it's not in the honor of the Torah that he possesses for him to go to that court. So we say asay shel kavod Torah adef, and therefore he may refrain. Amazing. Now another nuance that Rambam mentioned through and over there within a mominus in Halach Aleph. Now we'll see why the Rambam did it. When does a person have the right? Again, we're not saying you shouldn't go, but you can argue it's not me. It's about my Torah. It's not honorable for me to go to that court. Why should I go to them? I'm a greater scholar. I mean, fair. But if a person has that attitude, so then the din is if it's only about financial matters. But when it comes to a testimony that will either bring to light something that will clarify that something that is thought to be permitted may not be consumed. In other words, your testimony is needed for people not to eat what God said don't eat, or another activity that is awesome people don't know about. Or if your testimony is concerning a matter of a capital case, or even of a case where someone, if found guilty, will be chayiv malchus, or if you know the testimony that he'll get off the malchus. In this case, no one has an exemption. You must come and testify. And that's the application, one of the many applications of the pasuk of Mishlei, that ain't chachma, the ain't tfuna, the ain't das, the neged Hashem, which means that kol makim sheyesh chilul Hashem, whenever we're touching upon the desecration of God's name, if that is what's involved, ain't mashgichin al kavod harav, even if you're a rav. And normally we have to give honor to the rav. We don't care about the honor of the rav, because the greatest rav is God Almighty.
But if they're going to make a false judgment if he doesn't appear in financial matters, we don't take that into consideration?
I'm not going to use the words false judgment, and I think it's important, even though we just finished Hilchas Sanhedrin, but let's just say we're close by it. No one should expect for the judgment that comes from a Sanhedrin to be, in the limited case, accurate. Meaning, sometimes Kavan, you loan me money. I'll give you an example. God knows you loaned me money. You took me to court. You didn't have proof. Give me an example. The Beis Din is going to rule, I don't owe you. That doesn't mean you didn't lend me the money. God is the judge. God will see to it, Kavan, if you loan me money, I'm chayiv to you. We don't look at the Beis Din and at the judges as the ultimate justice system. The ultimate justice system is God.
Got it. Thank you.
In limitedness. So that's why, if it's money matters, again, of course, the Rambam also is not saying that this Chacham Gadol is not allowed to go. He's not saying. He's saying that you can't say you're mechuyev to go. It's a big difference. Halacha 3. Now, Kohen Gadol ain't a chayiv lahoyed. Wow. He doesn't have to b'chal go to court. Ella, only if the testimony is concerning a Jewish king. Then, hoylech lebeis din hagadol lemeidba. And the Rambam is writing Beis Din Hagadol because earlier on in Hilchos Sanhedrin, right, the Rambam dedicated the whole chapter, or a big part of a chapter, to say, like, what has to be judged in the Beis Din Hagadol? What could even be judged in a small Sanhedrin? What can even be taken to court in a Beis Din Shel Shloisha? One of them was, as we learned, that any case regarding a Melech B'Yisrael can only be adjudicated in the Beis Din Hagadol. There, it's not beneath the honor of the Kohen Gadol to go. Aval b'sharei duyos, which if it then patur halacha 4. So that covers, first of all, the obligation of going and the exceptions. You have to be summoned. The Chacham Gadol, the Kohen Gadol. Okay. Other than that, the general rule is you have to go to court. So that's the first part of the chapter. Now, from here until the end, as we'll continue also in the next chapter, it's going to be a very important hemshech. When people come to court, even though they're saying testimony, how does the Beis Din know that they're saying the truth? So we're going to learn some of the procedure that has to happen before we begin accepting what they're saying. Halacha 4, there's a positive commandment. Lidroish. Now, there's going to be different words that are used. To darshan, the words drashas means, oh my God, the rabbi is giving a drasha. Not in this context. Drasha means here to question. Let's use this general word. If there's an obligation from the Torah to question the Eidim. If Allah koir oisam, the word chakira means to interrogate them. Ulaharbois v'she'elasan, and to add many questions, to add. So we're going to learn the basic questions, and then you add to that. And we have to be very particular in this. There's a big chachma in interrogating people. Umasiyan oisai, one of the things that the judges do is that they divert his attention from topic to topic. In other words, they're focusing on topic A. They begin speaking about another topic, and then they come back to topic A. What happens when you do that? If a person is coming with not the truth, they get confused. In other words, if you're saying the emes, it doesn't take effort to say the truth. It takes effort to lie. You have to halk up. So they mess up your cup. You have to know how to do it. Why? Minimally, for the person to be silent, which at many times, if they don't know the answer, they're going to be told to leave. Not because we know that they're lying, but it could be they're lying. Or worse, they're actually going to say something different. They're going to contradict themselves. If there's any flaw in their testimony. And that's the meaning of the pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. The dorashta, he said the words dorasha means to question. V'chakarta, which means to interrogate. And then, as we'll see, there are basic questions, and then add many more questions. Part of the adding many more is changing the topic, coming back to the topic. The judges have to be extremely careful. While they're interrogating the witnesses, this is another Mishnah Pirkei Avos. You have to understand something. The more the people understand the methodology of the judges, the more they are able, if they are dishonest, to trick the system. So the judges have to be very mindful of that. If they have a certain pattern that they are stuck with, people will know, this is what the judge is going to do. He's first going to ask about these types of questions. Then he's going to go to another topic. Then he's going to come back. So the guy can prepare. So the judges have to be very careful. And the Rambam is also talking to himself. So everything we're going to be learning in this chapter and the subsequent chapters is not the whole system that the courts will use. You cannot put it down on paper, because then it will become even easier for people to be dishonest. Now, let's begin with that which we do right. The beginning of it all are 7 questions that are called chakiros. I know we translated the words chakiros as an interrogation. Okay, not to interrogate. No, we are interrogating them first with the following 7 questions. And let me recap before we even read the 7. The 7 questions have to do with the time and the place of the event. We're not even talking about the event, whether you saw a loan, whether you saw a murder. We're going to get to that in a moment. First, we want to establish when and where did whatever you're saying take place. And it's so important to establish the when and the where, because one of the mediums that we use objectively to know that the witnesses could be relied on is because the witnesses know that if they will be caught lying, whatever they are conspiring to do will happen to them. The only way you can make Edom into Edom Zoimimim, as we'll learn in this series, is that when they're testifying regarding anything, and other people come and say, how can you say that you saw X, Y, or Z in this time and that place, when in this time you were not in that place? Imanu Hayisem, you were with us. You can only refute and prove that the witnesses are false, Imanu Hayisem, if they clarified when is it and where is it that the event took place. Then I can tell them, how can you say that you saw A loaning money to B, or A killing B in LA on Monday afternoon? Monday afternoon, you were with us. So we have to first clarify the time and the place. That's the beginning of the beginning. And now it's another interesting thing. In the time and the place, it's not 2 questions. There were 6 of the 7 questions is about the time, and 1 is regarding the place. And it has to be that way. And you begin from the bigger measurements of time to the smaller measurements of time. The first question was, the event that you are testifying about, in what Shemitah cycle did it happen? Nowadays, we're not yet fully keeping the mitzvahs because we don't yet have a Beis HaMikdash. Shiach has to come. Even though it's still relevant, we know that Shemitah year, we just came off a Shemitah year. We know this year's the year of Hakel, Tavshin Pei Gimel. But the people were very minded. What cycle in the Yovel is this Shemitah? I don't know. No one knows. Well, not no one knows because we're not counting Yovel. But when you're counting Yovel, you have to begin. In what cycle of 7 years? That's question number one. And then when he gives the answer, then you ask him in what year? Even though you can argue if the guy says Tavshin Pei Gimel, so it's objectively known in what cycle of Shemitah. Doesn't matter. He has to answer that. What 7-year cycle are you in? What year are you in? In what month? What day of the month? What day of the week? What hour of the day? These are 6 questions regarding the time. And as we'll learn later, they didn't have watches then. So there's a certain small tolerance of inaccuracy in the hour of the day. Because people look at the height of the sun and the horizon, you can be off by an hour, as we'll see. So all of 6 of the 7 is what time? And the next question is, where did it happen? Now, what happens if the guy begins saying, today I witnessed a murder? If the guy says today, did he not already clarify the time? He did. He said today, whenever the today is. Of course, he didn't say where, that you have to ask him. But if the guy says today, that means he specified the detailed time. We don't ignore the other questions of time. Or if he says, yesterday I witnessed a murder, he still has to be asked, in what cycle of Shemitah, you have to cover these 7 questions. Now, don't think the word chakira will refer to the fundamental questions. The fundamental questions isn't only about time and place. The fundamental questions is also about the event itself. That's part of the chakira. Yosef al Sheva. Now, these 7 questions have to always be asked, so they're equal. Yosef al Sheva Hashois Bakol. On top of that, part of the chakira type of questions is, the Rambam is going to go into what are we discussing. If the testimony is about someone who served idols, God forbid, then again, the foundational questions will be clarifying more exactly what happened. Which idol did he worship? Yashke, Buddha, what exactly did he do? Or if, God forbid, someone is being summoned because he violated the Shabbos, and witnesses are saying he violated the Shabbos. So, which Shabbos? So, what time and what place? Where? But the question will be, you ask the witnesses, obviously, each one separately, obviously, one doesn't know the answers of the other. Ezu malacha also, what malacha did he do? How did he do that malacha? In other words, all of the questions that are touching on the specific of what is part of the chakiros questions, or he'idu, that was the test, the witness. What food did he eat? How much did he eat? Or what weapon did he use? All of these fundamental questions are b'chol hachakiros. Now, halacha 5. Hachakiros v'drishois. Remember these words, guys, in the Rambam. The Rambam is juxtaposing the word derasha, as we had in halacha daled, lidroish v'lachkoir. Here it's chakiros and derishois. The Rambam is using the word derisha for these fundamental questions. Zman, makom, and event. Hachakiros v'drishois, which is heim hadavarim sheheim iker ha'edos. That's the foundational part of the testimony, and this is what's going to bring about chiyuv or ptur. Veheim kavonas ha'maisa she'asam. It's the questions that define the deed that they're testifying about, and like we mentioned, v'kivon hazman, v'kivon hamakom, and it defines the time and the place, which is so necessary, as we mentioned above. Shebehem yuzmu ha'edim or lo yuzmu. Without it, you cannot make them into zaymimim. Now, the final halacha of this chapter adds the Rambam. We add other types of questions that are not fundamental questions. To the point, as we'll see, God willing, in the next chapter, that if the witnesses don't know the answer, not if they contradict themselves, if they don't know the answer, it doesn't matter. That secondary type of questioneering is called bidikois, examinations. And v'chol hamar b'bidikois areis meshuba. And understand something, even though they're not, you don't need to answer the questions, but if they contradict themselves or they contradict each other, you're going to disqualify them. So it's good to also have the secondary levels of questioneering. So again, that's getting familiarized with the words that the Rambam uses. Chakiros and dirishois are the fundamental questions, and the supplementary questions are called bedikois. Let's give examples of bedikas types of questions. If it's testimony regarding murder, and first you always cover the chakiros first. The next that we counted, which is that Rambam is repeating the kavanas hazman. It defines the time, it defines the place, and the nidrishu, right? The kavanas hamaisa. It defines the act, what act happened, what utensil, what was the murder weapon. So once those were covered, now boitkin bedikas. And they begin to ask the following types of questions. What was the victim or the perpetrator? What were they wearing? What types of clothing? Even like, was it white or was it black? Or the earth upon which that person you are saying was murdered, was it lighter earth? Was it redder earth? These types of questions are included in the category called bedikois. It says that Rambam Maisa Sho'amru Edim. When they began to answer to the Hakirois questions, like we want to know the Makim, which place, right? And we try to get them to define it to the most minute detail. So the witnesses says that the murder happened under the fig tree. Okay, so now they followed up. Listen, the figs of that tree, what color were the figs? Were they black? Were they white? Darker, lighter? Even the akotzim shaloisam, the stems of those figs, were they long? Were they short? That's the category of the bedikois. And the Rambam says, it's praiseworthy. Because guys, if the witnesses are saying the truth, generally, nothing, they won't get tripped up on it. If the witnesses are lying and they prepared, see, you can prepare better for the Hakiro's questions because you know that they're coming. You know what the questions are. It's easier to get to a line. No one knows what types of bedikas questions will be asked. So that's why it's that important to use bedikois questions as well. And the more, the better, God willing, to be continued.
Thank you.
That was just to say, guys, for the oilam over here, that the next class, tomorrow morning, Friday morning, God willing, we're going to go to Hilchos Eidus, but we're going to jump to chapters 21, 22, and 23. And we're going to do this. At the end of every class, I'll already see what tomorrow's class will be. I can say that I don't think this will ever create a problem for us, because even if we're going to jump into a middle of a topic, even if we'll have to review whatever needs to be reviewed to be able to understand it, we'll do it orally.